Welcome to part 4. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is possibly the biggest fighting game in history, but you already knew that. That's why you're here. So, today I thought we could look at all the origin games of the Smash fighters, again. By now you probably know how the rules of this work, but just in case you don't, what counts as an origin game is them being playable in that game. So for example, Ganondorf is never actually playable, so he won't be included. Also, I won't be including Mario Kart or Mario Party games on this list, just because I feel like that would make it a little bit more boring. Also, arcade games aren't going to be on this list. They must be on a home console or a portable released by Nintendo, Sony, Xbox, or any other publisher like that. And with all those rules out of the way, let's begin with the final part of this extremely long series. So, because I forgot, I actually have to review Wii-Fit and Little Mac. I forgot to do them last episode somehow, so here they are. Wii-Fit is possibly the oddest game on this list, being an exercise game. Using the Wii balance board, you can determine your weight, and it gives you exercises to help with that, whether it be yoga, or running in place, or playing these mini games. This game shouldn't necessarily be rated based on how fun it is per se, it should be rated more so on how well it helps you exercise, but still keeps the experience relatively fun. Wii Fit in general is rather enjoyable. It does feel like a legitimate workout sometimes, and it probably is helping something. The one problem, if you can call it that, is that these mini games are much more fun. They don't provide as much of a workout, but they're much more enjoyable compared to the actual exercises. So every time I boot up this game, I'll end up playing them. Another issue is, once you play it a couple times and you kinda quit for a few days, it's really hard to get back into. But maybe that's just because I'm lazy. Overall, Wii Fit is a pretty good exercise game, 7.5 out of 10. Punch-Out is the series I want to see Nintendo revive the most. I love all of the Punch-Out games, but today we review the very first Punch-Out on the NES. This game is very simple in general, just kinda dodge and then punch. It's a very arcadey feeling game, and I generally don't like that kind of game, but this may be my favorite non-Mario NES game. Just something about the controls, characters, audio, and graphics are all perfect. I like how all the boxers have this little secret you need to abuse to beat them. For example, Hippo Man seems unbeatable. He does tons of damage and seemingly blocks all punches. But to beat him, you actually need to hit him when he opens his mouth. And you may say, isn't that a bit obscure? And yeah, kinda. But most of them are a little bit easier. The game is hard, but not impossible, which I can really appreciate after playing other NES games. In this game, you play as a small underdog Little Mac, working your way up to the top. You can dodge left and right, move forward, block, and punch left and right. Like I said, pretty simple controls for this game. Overall, there isn't really much I can say about Punch-Out. It's simple, but that's why it's great. 8.5 out of 10. Okay, here we go with the actual new characters for this episode. Final Fantasy VII is the most recognizable RPG in all of history. Now, you may debate me on that, but even if you don't know what the game is, just hearing or will sound familiar. Final Fantasy VII is a landmark in gaming history, called possibly the best RPG of all time. Are those people correct? Maybe. Final Fantasy VII lives up to its reputation. The world building, characters, battle system, story, it's all revolutionary. The story of Final Fantasy VII begins with you playing as Cloud Strife, someone who joins an anti-corporate group because of the promise of payment. Throughout the game, however, your quest switches from taking down the evil corporation Shinra to tracking down and killing the famed soldier Sephiroth. You go through this gigantic world hunting down Sephiroth, finding side quests and new friends along the way. The game is so good partly because of the immersion. I myself have found that I'll play for hours getting super immersed in this world. The characters can sometimes have poorly translated or downright funny dialogue, but it doesn't really bother me too much. The battle system is something that I think most can agree is actually really good. In battle, you have a timer that goes up for each party member and your enemies. Once full, you will perform either your melee move or a magic move that takes SP. There's also this thing called Limit that slowly increases the more damage you take, and you can unleash these Limit Breaker moves that are super strong. The battle system is so good because it isn't the normal turn-based thing. The timer system keeps you on your toes, constantly having to make quick decisions because the longer you take, the more time your opponent has to hit you. It feels a lot more immersive than turn-based combat, although it can sometimes be just pressing circles over and over again. I would normally explain the story, but 1, it's super complicated, and 2, I think it's best to let you experience it if you haven't already. The final boss is really good, and long. Also, the graphics were at the time absolutely revolutionary. And even now, they don't look that bad. There's minimal frame rate dips, and I can always understand exactly what something is supposed to be. The few problems I have with Final Fantasy VII is just that the story is sometimes being too complicated, and to a certain extent, the game can sometimes feel a little ridiculously long. Also, the grindy nature of the game can sometimes make combat feel too repetitive, but overall, Final Fantasy VII is a phenomenal RPG and something that practically brought the genre back to life. 8.5 out of 10. Corrin's lame, bad game, 7 out of 10. Okay, fine. Fire Emblem Fates is a weird game. There's two options, Fire Emblem Fates Birthright and Fire Emblem Fates Conquest. They follow two different possibilities where Corrin joins different fates, haha, get it? For this review, we're going to be looking at Birthright. Fire Emblem Fates is actually pretty good, from what I've heard. I think where it falls a bit flat is Corrin themselves. Corrin is ironically the most boring part of the game, and while it may seem impossible to make a silent protagonist intriguing, literally just play any Persona game. Minato and Joker are some of my favorite characters in general. But enough about Persona. Fire Emblem Fates is still good. It has intriguing gameplay, great music, and honestly, I just become a little numb from all the Fire Emblem games. So I just don't have much to say about this. I'm sorry Fire Emblem fans, it's not really my thing. Overall, Fire Emblem is a solid 8 out of 10. Bayonetta is something I've never been that into, but I can certainly see the appeal. The characters really shine here. They all feel so alive and are just so fun to interact with. Everything about this game is good actually. The combat system is fun, the music is beautiful, and the graphics are great too. I especially like how unforgiving the game is. While normally it would annoy me, it makes sense since the enemies you're fighting are so strong. It makes sense that one wrong move gets you killed. Speaking on the combat a little bit more, I love the combo system, and Witch Time is also super fun. Just the whole combat system in general is so cool. The game's art style isn't really my thing though. I can appreciate the graphical quality, but I didn't really like a lot of the grayish areas. Bayonetta herself is a really fun character though. Cool to see a female lead in a game like this. Overall, Bayonetta is solid, but I don't really have anything in particular to say about it. 8 out of 10. When I first played Splatoon, it legitimately confused me because I couldn't fathom the idea of Nintendo creating a new IP. Splatoon's idea is pretty cool. Basically, it's a 5v5 shooter, but instead of getting kills or capturing a flag or planting something, it's basically just a turf war. The whole Inkling thing basically means you're a kid now, you're a squid now. You can basically become a squid in your own ink, and doing so will make you a lot harder to hit, and you will refill your ink. There are a bunch of different weapons to use, from a sniper to a paint roller to a shotgun-like bucket. The weapons and cosmetics are sprawling and pretty impressive. The multiplayer matches are clearly the best part of the game. They're balanced fairly well, and although it may seem bad to aim with the Wii U, it's not impossible. The online component is really good. Remember, this was before the era of Nintendo Switch Online. And my personal favorite part of Splatoon is the world it takes place in. I love having relatively unneeded characters that just add to the world building, like the Squid Sisters, Off the Hook, or the little city you can walk through to customize your stuff and see what people are saying on Miiverse. There's also a story mode, which in my opinion isn't a strong part of the game. I didn't really enjoy it, but it certainly wasn't awful. The game's main content is definitely the online matches, however, and I did enjoy playing it back then, but I think now with Splatoon 2 out and 3 on the horizon, there isn't much of a reason to go back to this one. It's a great start to the series, but 2 and most likely 3 will take the ideas it began with and expand on them a lot more. Overall, Splatoon is a great online turf war with a super unique and fun aesthetic. 8.5 out of 10. The Castlevania series is something I've never been that into, but from what I understand it's about a long lineage of people all from the same family vanquishing Dracula in all the different forms he takes. Beginning in the Middle Ages and the fight against the vampire and the family continuing to this day. Oops, wrong footage. All jokes aside, I've never been that into Castlevania, but I'm excited to begin with the original Castlevania on NES. So first of all, this game looks really, really good for the time. This game is 34 years old and still looks understandable. Next, the sound design and music is absolutely beautiful. I may not be that into Castlevania, but the soundtrack is something anyone can get behind. So the game oozes quality, and may be my favorite NES game in terms of artistic direction. Now here's where I say that the gameplay is bad, and it's actually not. The gameplay of this game is super fun and doesn't even necessarily feel unfair like a game like Ninja Gaiden. But that isn't to say it's easy. You will die over and over and over to the same guy. This game has absolutely no mercy, and if you die and run out of lives, you go all the way back. And just because I say this game doesn't feel unfair doesn't make it any less frustrating. This game took me out. It's another perfect example of a game that just is too hard. This is such a nice game in terms of art and music, and it's so unfortunate that it's buried under an impossible difficulty. I may sound like a broken record, but overall, Castlevania is beautifully designed, but it just is too hard for my taste. 7.5 out of 10. So, I'm actually debating what Richter's first game is. It seems like it's Castlevania Rondo of Blood, which is technically the earliest appearance of Richter. However, Rondo of Blood is for the TurboGrafx-16, which I unfortunately don't have a way to play. However, there was an alternate version of Rondo of Blood released for the SNES titled Castlevania Dracula X, which is similar to Rondo of Blood but not the same. I will be playing Dracula X for this video though. If you think Rondo of Blood is the correct answer, then cry about it. As you just saw with Simon, I don't really get Castlevania, but I'm much more into a game like Metroid because of how older Castlevania games are full of trial and error, which I generally don't like. Dracula X, however, I actually liked at first. I liked the controls a lot and the simpler gameplay style. I understood the mechanics rather quickly, the game looked super nice and the music was great as always, and I really liked the level design. The whole aesthetic was really cool actually, and like I said before, it wasn't too hard. That was until I hit the second stage. The stage itself isn't too hard, but this bat boss is just so incredibly difficult. And even if you get past that, the level design in the latter half of the game becomes a bit less refined in my opinion. And honestly, I stopped enjoying it as much as I previously did. Overall, Castlevania Dracula X is an upgrade from the original, but still maintains some of its problems. 8 out of 10. Pokemon Moon is great. Like, honestly, it's really good. I'm not sure if it's a hot take or not because I've seen some people say it isn't as good as the others, but honestly, I love Sun and Moon. I think that the best part of it is its design. Alola is one of my favorite Pokemon regions. So much new stuff is here. The 4-island system, the Tapus, the regional variants, the new Rotom decks, and honestly, the Z moves are really cool. Like, yeah, they're a total gimmick, but I still like the idea of them. Also, the new Pokemon are surprisingly good. I really like all of them, especially the Alolan forms. Ninetales, Marowak, and Sandslash are all fantastic. I would say that this is one of the most inspired regions by its real-world counterpart. The Hawaii inspiration really adds to this game's atmosphere. It kinda reminds me of Mario Sunshine, them taking a concept and just running with it the whole game. Although a small addition, the new beans and coffee are just so fun. I always remember going to get a drink at every Pokemon Center. This is actually the Pokemon game I've put the most time into, which may make me seem biased, and I am, but I really do like this game for what it is. If I didn't, I wouldn't have played it for so long. I think one of my only problems with this game is that occasionally the random encounters can still be annoying. I prefer Sword and Shield style of having the Pokemon be visible. The graphics and music are all great. This is just a solid modern Pokemon game. In my opinion, the best since Black and White. Overall, Pokemon Sun and Moon are just great games. 8.5 out of 10. Hey, my name is Coolnugget, and I'm addicted to talking about Persona games. This is an AA meeting! I really like Persona 5, and for an explanation of why, I'll give it simply. 1, I went into this game expecting nothing as I had no idea what I was getting myself into. 2, I played this game at the beginning of the pandemic and it kinda kept me sane. And 3, it's a very personal game. I understand why many don't like Persona. It works best when you get lost in its world, when you feel that immersion, whether it be spending time with confidants, going to work, or going to the metaverse. But enough about that, let me actually look at this game completely objectively. Mild spoilers for Persona 5, but I won't be going too much into the story. So Persona 5's story is about 8 teens who have been unfairly wronged in society. They then gain the power to somehow go into the manifestation of their target's hearts. They can then make those adults have a change of heart and confess to all their crimes. It's quite a simple story, and that was originally my biggest problem. But after Joker gets arrested, don't worry, it happens right at the beginning, so it's not a spoiler, the story suddenly becomes a much more deep analysis. Are they right? Is the freedom to change hearts something that teenagers should really have? Their morality is tested by the final boss, and I'll leave you to see the results. Another thing I've gone without mentioning is Akechi and Joker's relationship, and it's simultaneously one of my favorite and one of my least favorite parts of the game. Goro Akechi is a very successful detective who prides himself on how successful he's become. The problem is mostly his personality. Akechi pushes all of his friends away but simultaneously wants them. He wants the approval. And here he sees Joker. someone with tons of friends, someone with everything he wants despite being some criminal living in an attic. Their dynamic is great, this whole concept is great, but it falls a little flat. I think that you don't spend enough time with Akechi, and so the relationship they have doesn't feel fleshed out. Also, the little twist at the end feels too much like a Disney movie. But enough about Akechi. My other problem is that the entirety of Okumura's palace is just too hard, poorly designed, and I don't like the story events during that palace. But enough about the parts I don't like. Persona 5 is a beautiful, stylish, and well-told, fun, and well-designed experience. The gameplay in the normal world is great, studying for tests, going out with friends, and everything in between. In the metaverse, the normal, boring turn-based combat is somehow super enjoyable. The music is indescribably good. A great mix between a quick song like Last Surprise and a calm song like Beneath the Mask. Overall, Persona 5 is a fantastic, stylish, and beautiful RPG with some problems that are fixed in the remake. 9.5 out of 10. Psst, play Persona 5 Royal. It's a 10 out of 10. I'm sorry in advance. I have literally only played one of these, and even then, not that much. I'm going to be 100% transparent, I don't actually fully finish a lot of the really long games here that I haven't already played. I instead use online reviews or talk to friends who have played them, and ask for their opinion. If I want to get these videos out monthly, I can't really play all the super long RPGs, and not only do I not have the time, I don't even really have a way to play them. So I'm not going to be able to give 4 ratings based on what I've played. I apologize for not being able to properly rate these characters, but just understand it's due to time constraints and just me not being able to play some of them. Here are your 4 numbers. Banjo Kazooie is a game those who haven't played are mostly confused on why many people like it. It's just another 3D platform on the N64, right? I mean, there really hasn't been a modern remake or a sequel. So, are those people right? Is Banjo Kazooie just all nostalgia? No. Banjo Kazooie is fantastic, and that's coming from someone who didn't even play the game as a kid. So what makes it so great? Well, it's mostly just how solid it is. Looking at it, it appears to be some licensed kid-friendly game, which usually aren't that good. But Banjo's world is something that anyone can fall into. The controls and different moves are another reason I enjoy this game so much. The N64 has so many buttons, and they're all used here. There's moves you can only do in the air, moves you need a platform for, moves you can only do on the ground, and even more. The gameplay mostly consists of solving puzzles to find just every collectible you can imagine. Puzzle pieces, or jiggies, music notes, jinjos, and new moves. There are 9 worlds you can go through, and to get into each, you have to use jiggies to create the full picture, and then you can step into the level. Like I mentioned, in each level you can find all these collectibles, and really that's your only goal. It isn't like there's some boss. You just collect these jiggies, find the jinjos, because if you find all 5 you get another jiggy. Why I think this game is so good is because it's made by Rare, who very clearly understood the N64 hardware very well. They were killing it with GoldenEye, Diddy Kong Racing, Conker's Bad Fur Day, and Banjo Kazooie. They were objectively the best third-party developer for the console, and made, in my opinion, some of the best, if not literally the best, N64 games. Most third parties went to Sony, but Rare stayed and honestly perfected the hardware. My one problem with Banjo is that the saving when you leave levels is kinda weird. Normally it's fine, you'll keep your jinjos and jiggies, but you lose your music notes, which sucks because there's 100 of them, so it'd be great if you could leave a level without collecting all of them. But honestly, it's not that big of a deal. Finally, the music is absolutely fantastic. Overall, Banjo Kazooie is a phenomenal 3D platformer, and you know what? Possibly my favorite N64 game, 9.5 out of 10. Fatal Fury is one of the only franchises I had literally never heard of until they were introduced into Smash. And so after scouring the very confusing history of this series, I found that the first game on a console is Fatal Fury on the Neo Geo. I don't usually enjoy older fighting games due to the lack of single-player content, and Fatal Fury is somewhat lacking in this area as well, with the only single-player content being the King of Fighters mode. The gameplay is actually simpler than Street Fighter, with only weak and strong hits, excluding the medium hit. The special inputs remain, and while most Smash fans start crying when they see a quarter circle, I actually half main Terry, so I'm used to the inputs. The gameplay is pretty sharp, but I would prefer a bit quicker gameplay. I actually think I enjoyed Street Fighter more than this. There were only 3 playable characters at the beginning, and while I can see how the gameplay can be interesting, I think the sequels really improve it. The game was fun, but a little too slow and repetitive for me. Overall, Fatal Fury is a great beginning to its series, 8 out of 10. Okay, I know I've given Fire Emblem a hard time, but 3 houses is actually really fun. You play as Byleth, and you can choose from 3 houses, being Golden Deer, Black Eagles, and Blue Lions. Towards the beginning of the game, you actually have to select which house you want to join, and trust me, this choice matters very much, just believe me on that one. In the game, you're a teacher and you teach. With your students, you can form relationships, don't worry, you're like the same age as them, and you can make your students form relationships with each other, allowing them to be more efficient in battle. The characters in general are pretty likable, and even if they're not likable, they're realistic. So the story and characters are all great, but what about the actual gameplay? Well, as a professor, it's fun. Like I mentioned before, I enjoy the interactions you have with your students, and just talking with the characters in general is great. But the actual combat is still great. I actually really enjoyed the combat here. I think they perfected the Fire Emblem formula, and despite not liking the older games too much, I enjoyed this one. If I had one problem, it would be the repetition of the game, specifically the combat segments. They start to feel a little samey, but after certain events, the game takes a shift into being a much more dramatic story, and I think that's where it shines. Also, the graphics and music are both phenomenal, but female Byleth's eyes look a bit weird, I guess? But that's super nitpicky. Overall, Fire Emblem 3 Houses is great, and I actually enjoyed it surprisingly. 8.5 out of 10. ARMS was never my thing. I never really got into it, even when it was brand new. The gameplay is just a bit boring to me, and while I really like every other aspect of the game, the gameplay is a major part of the game. I really like the music and character design of ARMS. Like, honestly, just the aesthetic and presentation of the game is the highlight, but the gameplay is very repetitive, and it's just kind of boring to me. The way the game functions is you have these boxing matches with extendable arms, and each character has a special ability, like Twin Tails Float. You can just kind of do this for 3 rounds to see who becomes victorious, but the methodical nature of the punching is just so repetitive for some reason. I think it's because each round lasts pretty long, and most people play super campy, but the game is still solid, just kind of boring. Overall, I love the world of ARMS, but the gameplay itself is just not refreshing enough. 7.5 out of 10. A Minecraft review is something I've tried to do many times, but I've never actually properly made the video. Part of the reason is because it's Minecraft. You know, the best-selling game of all time. Also, what is Minecraft? Are user-made maps included? What about mods? Servers? Well, here I am, finally doing a proper review of Minecraft. I think one thing most people will agree on is that single-player vanilla Minecraft is kinda boring. Every time I play vanilla alone, I just feel so lonely for some reason, and it's almost always the same. Minecraft is entirely dependent on your environment, and so therefore there will be whole playthroughs where you'll miss out on so much of what the game has to offer. But at the same time, that's part of the beauty of Minecraft. Despite just saying that the game can feel the same, what isn't the same is the world, which is one of the highlights of Minecraft. Another big highlight is the amount of freedom you have. Look at this completely new world compared to this one me and my friends almost maxed out. We have everything, and although that sounds fun, that's another point of conversation.
Okay, I'm gonna jump off now. Watch this. I'm gonna fail horribly or die.
Minecraft doesn't ever end. Sure, you beat the final boss, but the game continues. This isn't anything necessarily revolutionary, but I do think it's cool. You can keep building up your world, making tasks more and more efficient, and that's really what Minecraft is all about. Efficiency. I'll give a literal example. Here is a mine that I made. Originally, it was just a hole in the ground, and to go down and come back up, it would take around 2 minutes or so. But now I've added a railway system, allowing me to travel much more fast. Taming horses to move faster, filling out maps to get to specific areas quicker, creating automatic experience farms to get levels quicker. At its core, Minecraft's progression is all about stronger tools and efficiency, but that comes with a cost. When I say that Minecraft never ends, that is true. However, there is a certain point where there just isn't much to do. Me and my friend played in a world, and we have literally everything. Full enchanted netherite armor, we're super fast and have any resource we'd ever need. And it's boring, really. Sure, we could complete all the achievements, but most of those aren't as fun as you think. And honestly, we're done with this world. And I think that my 2 biggest problems with Minecraft is single player survival isn't that fun in my opinion, and there isn't much to do in endgame content. However, I'm skipping out on another important mode. Creative mode, where you can fly, have every block and item in the game at your disposal, and can create some pretty cool stuff. That that banner looks kinda sussy. I used to spend hours making builds in creative mode, but we're skipping out on another one of the best aspects of Minecraft, user-generated content. Firstly, there are adventure maps in which you basically download a world someone else makes and then that takes you on an adventure and you play through it. There are dropper maps, story-based maps, parkour maps, and much more. Texture packs are another big one, allowing the game to look basically however you want. And some people have taken this simple concept very, very far. There are mods that allow any amount of mobs, blocks, and tools to be added to the game. Modded Minecraft is truly a different experience, and you can make maps with mods to create even more diverse gameplay. Minecraft has a built-in multiplayer system allowing you to connect to anyone's world, as long as you have that world's IP. There are some massive servers based around minigames like Mineplex or The Hive, rest in peace. There are some based around creative, roleplay, factions, prison. There are so many different servers that add a whole nother level to this game. And finally, the game is just super fun. Anyone can play and enjoy it. You get sucked into this low poly world. It's truly a sandbox game like no other, and is, in my opinion, the most influential game to come out in the 2010s. Some may call it overrated, and they may be correct, but there's no denying that Minecraft is popular for a reason, and objectively looking at it without any outside forces like the community, you can see why it holds the title of the most popular game of all time. Overall, Minecraft is truly a game like no other. A beautifully crafted and masterful triumph. 9.5 out of 10. I have never liked Xenoblade 2, which sucks because I know that a lot of people love it, but it's just so basic. It doesn't have the same magic that the original Xenoblade does. It's just so uninspired. The characters look exactly how you'd expect them to look, and while those characters have interesting stories, that doesn't make me like the designs anymore. The story is just a bit too basic for my personal taste. Like I said, I feel like it lacks the scope and intrigue of the original Xenoblade. The characters just aren't good. Like, I'm sorry, but they're either so uninteresting or just unlikable. The combat is fine, I guess, but I still prefer the original. The map isn't nearly as interesting as the original, and yes, I know I keep bringing up the original, but it's the best comparison I can make. Even if I were to properly review it without the first game, I still wouldn't really like it. While I don't necessarily like the map, the visuals are great and the areas are pretty good too. The game does have pop-in and frame rate hiccups though. Like I said, I don't really like the mechanics, like the upgrade system or the general gameplay, but every now and then I do enjoy it. I can see what they were going for and I do get immersed. It isn't really all bad, but overall Xenoblade Chronicles 2 just isn't for me, and it feels like a major downgrade from its original. 7.5 out of 10. Tekken 1 is super hard. Like, super hard. It has super crazy combos and will take weeks to even properly learn how to combo with one character. But I mean, that's Tekken. That's what it's known for, expansive movesets. But there's a reason you don't see many talk about the original Tekken. It's just its follow-ups, but worse. There isn't much Tekken 1 can call its own, but looking at it as a new game, yeah, it's great. It's a good shake-up from Street Fighter, featuring more moves and being in 3D. Speaking of 3D, the graphics look a bit rough now, or a lot rough now, but at the time it was pretty good. I think honestly Tekken just isn't my thing. It suffers from a lot of the things I dislike about old fighting games. It basically has zero single player content and being really hard to get into, but it did introduce the world of Tekken, so it has to be given credit for that. Overall, Tekken is good, just a bit too complicated for my personal taste. 7.5 out of 10. And we actually reviewed Sora all the way back in part 2. I reviewed him because I was excited for Kingdom Hearts being in Smash. So that concludes it. In the final part of this video where I combine all 4 parts, Sora will be in the right place, but for now, that's all the characters I have to review. We are finally done this series. I just want to say what an amazing journey this has been. Over the past 5 months crafting this video, I thought of the idea years ago actually, but I just never made it because I thought it would be too hard of a project. But look at me now, wrapping it up. You may agree with some of my points, you may disagree with some of my points, but for the final time, don't leave your opinion in the comments. I don't care.